2.3 The birth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. While people rejoiced at the great victory that Allah had bestowed on them, Abdul Muttalib received some good news. Amina sent word that a grandson had been born to him. Great was the old man's joy when he came and took the child of his beloved son into his arms. He carried him straight to the Kaaba, and after going around it 7 times with the child, he said, "Blessed child, I will call thee Muhammad. The birth of this child was ushered in by glory and triumph for the ancient house. Blessed is he." When his people asked him why he had named the child Muhammad, preferring it to the names of his forefathers, he said, "Because I want him to be praised in the heavens of Allah above and on the earth of his people." The name Muhammad means he to whom praise is due. On the 7th day after Muhammad's birth, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his grandfather gave a great feast according to the custom of the Arabs. 2.4 The wet nurses. Now they waited for the wet nurses to come down from the mountains, for the air of Mecca, cooped up in the middle of rocky mountains, was considered unhealthy for babies. It was the custom of Arab ladies of noble birth to give their babies to wet nurses who lived in the invigorating desert air. Some of these tribes who lived in the desert were famous as wet nurses, among them Banu Sa'ad. While waiting for their arrival, Amina gave the baby to Thuwayba, a slave of Abu Jahl, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's kinsman, to nurse. She nursed him only a few days, but he was very good to her all her life, and when she died, he asked about her son who had passed away before her. The wet nurses came. They were from Banu Sa'ad, and they selected the babies who had fathers and passed by the fatherless, for they counted on being noticed and generously rewarded by the fathers. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was left without a wet nurse, but just as the tribe was about to leave, Halima, the daughter of Abu Du'aib, said to her husband, "I hate to return to my companions without a child. I shall go and take that fatherless infant." "Yes, do so," said her husband. "Perhaps Allah will cause him to be a blessing for us." Halima had not been given an infant at first because she was less well off than the rest. She relates that after she took Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everything seemed to prosper. Her goats increased in number and yielded more milk. Her chickens grew fat and increased, and people used to tell their shepherds, "See what Halima's sheep graze, and let our sheep graze in the same pasture." 2.5 Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the desert. One day, when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 3 years old, his foster brother went to Halima crying, "Mother, mother, 2 men in white are holding my Qurayshi brother." Halima relates, "I ran to him and his foster father ran to him. We found him standing there looking pale. I asked him, 'What is the matter, my son?' And he said, 2 men in white came and laid me on my back. They took out something from my inside and left." Halima and her husband did not know what to think, but the incident passed and the child was well and rapidly grew bigger and stronger. He remained in the desert, breathing the pure desert air and learning the pure tongue of the desert Arabs until he was 5 years old. In later years, joking, he used to tell his friends, "I am the purest Arab among you. I am a Qurayshi and I was nursed by Banu Sa'ad." When Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was about 5 years old, Halima met some men from Abyssinia who seemed very much interested in the child and kept asking her questions about him. Then they said, "This child will be an individual of great importance. We will take him to our country with us. We have heard about him before." Halima could barely escape with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then she returned him to his mother in Mecca, judging that he would be safer there. Halima and her people remained a happy memory to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he grew up, he used to shower her with gifts whenever she came to visit him. Once, after his marriage to Khadija, there was a year of scarcity in the mountains, so when Halima came to visit him, she returned with camels carrying water and food and 40 head of sheep. 2.6 Return to Mecca. When Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was returned to Mecca, his grandfather, now a venerable old man, supported him handsomely and lavished upon him love and care. This great old man used to have a couch placed for himself in the shade of the Kaaba, and all his sons used to come and sit on the ground around it as a sign of respect. But when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, his grandfather made him sit on the couch beside him, patted him on the shoulder, and showed him such marked affection that no one ever suggested that he ought to sit below with his uncles. One day, when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was about 6 years old, his mother decided to take him with her to visit his father's uncles, Banu Najjar of Yathrib. She took Ayman, the only slave his father had left, with them. When they arrived in Yathrib, she showed him where his father had been before them, and where he was buried. After a visit of 1 month in Yathrib, they mounted their camels and set out for Mecca. On the way, in a village called Al-Abwa, Amina fell ill and died. She was buried there, a few miles away from where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's father was buried. After his mother, the only parent he had known, was buried, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned, a sad, small figure, with the slave Ayman, to Mecca. This endeared him yet more to his aged grandfather, and made the great man, who showed no sign of affection for his grown sons, tender and loving in the treatment of this small, lonely figure. But, as if fate insisted on making bereavement and grief the little boy's portion, his grandfather died when he was 8 years old. Muhammad ﷺ was inconsolable, following his grandfather's bier, sobbing all the way. 2.7. Under Abu Talib's care. The death of Abdul Muttalib was a blow to all Banu Hashim, for none among his sons could take his place. None of Quraysh had his qualities of mind and character, his judgment or his strength, and no man was held in such high esteem by the Arabs. Before his death, Abdul Muttalib had entrusted his son, Abu Talib, with the care of Muhammad ﷺ. Abu Talib was not the eldest of his sons, nor was he the wealthiest, Al-Abbas being by far the richest. However, Abu Talib was the noblest in character, honoured and respected by all Quraysh. Abu Talib began to like Muhammad ﷺ and then to love him as if he was his own son, with a fierce loyalty, so that in later years, the years of trial and hardship, he stood firm like a mountain to protect Muhammad ﷺ from the wrath of Quraysh. The boy had a most loving and lovable disposition. He was very kind-hearted, sensitive and compassionate towards the sufferings of others. He was good, so very good, that he soon earned among his youthful companions the title of Al-Amin, which means in Arabic, the truthful, the sincere, the trustworthy. He was worthy of this epithet which clung to him all his life, for Muhammad ﷺ would never tell a lie. Even in very adverse circumstances, he would never speak anything but the truth. 2.8. Journey to Ash-Sham. When Muhammad ﷺ was around 12 years old, Abu Talib decided to go on a trading expedition to Ash-Sham. He did not think of taking the young boy with him, for the journey was long, the desert route rough, with little water, and full of dangers. But Muhammad ﷺ yearned to go with his uncle, whom he had grown to love as a father. Abu Talib hesitated, but when he saw how the boy hated to be parted from him, he said, "By Allah, I'll never leave you behind." On the way, approaching Ash-Sham, the caravan of Quraysh passed by the cell of a Christian hermit, Bahira, who lived and worshipped in a secluded spot in the desert. It was not the first time that the caravans of Quraysh had passed by his cell. He had never taken any notice of them before, but this time he prepared food for them and insisted that they all partake of his food. He watched them, carefully scanning each face, then he cried, "But I insisted that none of you refuse my hospitality." They assured him that they were all present, but he repeated his words. They replied that they were all there, except a little boy who was playing by the camels. Bahira sent them to bring him. When Muhammad ﷺ appeared, the monk asked whose son he was. "Mine," said Abu Talib protectively. "No, you're not telling the truth," replied Bahira. "Very well, he is my brother's child. His father has passed away," said Abu Talib. "Ah, this is as it should be," said the monk. "This boy should have no father." Then he began to urge Muhammad ﷺ to answer his questions. "By Allat and Al-Uzza," he began with the names of the two famous idols of Quraysh. Muhammad ﷺ stopped him, saying, "Ask what you will, but do not mention them to me. I loathe them." This, Bahira noted, was also as it should be. He asked some more questions. Then he saw that between the boy's shoulder blades there was a birthmark, which those who knew about such matters recognized as the seal of prophethood. Bahira told his uncle that this child would be of very great importance in the years to come, and advised him not to go further inland with him, lest the Jews recognize in him the same marks as he had recognized, and harm the boy. Muhammad ﷺ returned safely to Mecca with Abu Talib, and did not make any more journeys to Ash-Sham. Chapter 3. 3.1. Life with his uncle. Muhammad ﷺ continued to live with his uncle and to do the jobs that the young men of Mecca used to do. When the sacred months arrived, the months when the Arabs did not fight but made the pilgrimage to the Kaaba, he either remained with his uncle in Mecca or visited the neighbouring fairs of Ukaz and Dhul Majaz. In these fairs there were wares of all kinds for sale, as well as declamations of poetry and oratory. The Arabs were poets by nature, and poetry was in their blood. Whenever they felt great emotion they would speak in verse. They composed poems about everything, their history, their lineage, their clans, their loves and their enemies. Verse was the language of their hearts. Each year there was a prize at the fair for the very best poems. They were hung on the walls for all to see and read, and they became classics. Many critics consider this the golden age of Arabic poetry. Muhammad ﷺ listened, saw, admired, but also criticized. 3.2. The Covenant of Redress, Al-Fudul. It so happened that a man from one of the clans of Quraysh killed a man from the tribe of Hawazin out of jealousy, for the latter had acquired the job of guide to a caravan of al-Mundhir, which the man from Quraysh had coveted. The result was a war between Quraysh and Hawazin, which lasted for 4 years. In this war, Muhammad ﷺ used to collect the arrows for his uncles to use again, and perhaps in the last year or so he was old enough to take part in battle. After this war, Quraysh felt that it was their man who had been in the wrong, and that if they continued to support his claim, their prestige among the tribes would suffer, and their unrivaled position as keepers of the ancient house would be challenged. They were the keepers of the house of Allah, and as such it was their duty, more than any other tribe, to be absolutely fair and impartial even against their own. They knew that, had Abdul Muttalib been alive, this would not have happened. No man now held the position of high esteem and authority that Abdul Muttalib had enjoyed, so they decided to make a covenant that would give them jointly the authority he had enjoyed. The different branches of Quraysh made a covenant together to be on the side of the wronged party until he obtained redress. Muhammad ﷺ, young as he was delighted by this covenant. It was in accord with his upright nature, and he used to remember it fondly, saying, "It was a covenant I attended at the house of Judan, and if I had been called to fight to uphold it, I would have answered the call." 3.3. The Life of Mecca. War between the tribes did not take up more than a few days of every year. Between wars, the Meccans had ample time to attend to trade, to amuse themselves, and enjoy life generally. They were fond of drink, women, poetry, and spending the warm summer nights in revelry. Muhammad ﷺ, now on the threshold of manhood, cared for none of these pleasures of the night. He had a deep, penetrating mind, an observant eye, and there was so much to see and hear in this world of marvels that afforded greater pleasure than drink and oblivion. Like other Meccan youths, he worked as a shepherd, tending the sheep of his people. Remembering this period of his life in later years, he used to say, "Musa became a prophet while tending sheep, and Dawood became a prophet while tending sheep, and I used to tend the sheep of my people at Al-Ajyad. Allah has made no man a prophet who was not a shepherd." This job was in harmony with his meditative, incorruptible nature. He had the wide open spaces, the high mountains, the skies, all the majesty of creation to himself, away from the narrow streets of Mecca, away from its narrower superstitions and futile worship of stones. He relates that on 2 rare occasions he felt like going down to Mecca to enjoy its gay nightlife. He left his sheep with a companion and descended towards Mecca. The first time he saw a wedding procession and, being amused by it, stood to watch the wedding rites. Then he felt drowsy and succumbed to sleep. On the second occasion he heard strange and enthralling music as he was descending the mountain, so he sat to listen, fell asleep, and did not go down. So he remained elevated and unspoiled by the life of the city. He lived a life of observation and contemplation of the grandeur of creation, its exquisite harmony and variety. 3.4. Trade for Khadija. He had no ambition to earn more money or gain social status. He was tranquil, happy with his sheep. But his uncle, who loved him dearly, wanted more for him than tending sheep. Abu Talib had many children and was not well off enough to help his nephew. Nevertheless, he wanted for Muhammad ﷺ the position in society that he felt was his due, and so he was on the lookout for a suitable job for him. One day he heard that Khadija, the daughter of Khuwaylid, wanted to hire a man from Quraysh to trade for her. Khadija was a very beautiful woman of intelligence and ability. She was extremely wealthy, for she had inherited much money from her deceased husband. Many of the greatest of Quraysh had asked for her hand in marriage, but she had refused them all, preferring to remain unattached and to attend to her trade and financial affairs. When Abu Talib heard that she wanted someone to trade for her, he called his nephew and said, "Nephew, I am not a wealthy man, and times are hard for us. I have heard that Khadija has hired so-and-so for 2 bakras, but I won't accept that for you. Would you like me to speak to her?" "As you wish," said Muhammad ﷺ. So Abu Talib went to Khadija and said, "Khadija, would you like to hire Muhammad? You have hired so-and-so for 2 bakras, but we shan't accept less than 4 for Muhammad." Always gracious, Khadija said, "Had you asked this for a loathsome stranger, I would have agreed. So how much more when you ask it for someone near and dear?" Muhammad ﷺ's uncle returned and related to his nephew what had taken place, saying, "This is provision that Allah has sent you." Muhammad ﷺ left with Maysara, Khadija's man, whom Abu Talib had charged to take good care of him. En route, the caravan passed by the ancient ruins of Madian and Thamud, peoples who had rejected the message from Allah and in consequence had been destroyed. Muhammad ﷺ knew nothing of this as yet. They journeyed on to Asham, where he saw landscapes of luxurious vegetation and gushing rivers, very different from the austere and stark desert scenes. Intelligent and honest, Muhammad ﷺ was able in his trade for Khadija to bring back more profit than those before him. His upright and modest nature earned him the liking and respect of Maysara. When the caravan reached the Az-Zaharan pass on its return journey towards Mecca, Maysara said to Muhammad ﷺ, "Muhammad, go to Khadija ahead of us and tell her what Allah has done for her at your hands. She will be most grateful." So Muhammad ﷺ rode alone and reached Mecca towards noon. Khadija was standing on the balcony of her house. She recognized him as he approached on his camel and went down to receive him. 3.5. Marriage to Khadija. They sat in her house, and Muhammad ﷺ related the strange and beautiful things he had seen on this successful journey. Muhammad ﷺ was 23 years old, very handsome, with dark, bright eyes, jet black hair and beard, and long, thick lashes. His manner was refined, his speech elegant yet unaffected. He was neither too tall nor too short. He came from a long line of men who had been rulers of Mecca, feared and respected. There was in his bearing that which inspired respect, and in his eyes that which made him obeyed in spite of his modesty. Khadija was moved by his description of what he saw and what he had done for her, and she soon realized that the emotion she felt was love, she who had spurned all the greats of the Quraysh. She confided in her friend Nafisa, and Nafisa went to take up the matter with Muhammad ﷺ. "Why don't you get married?" she asked. "Because I do not have the means," said Muhammad ﷺ. If you had the means, would you refuse beauty, ability, wealth, and honour? Asked Nafisa. But who could that be? He said. Khadija, replied Nafisa. Muhammad ﷺ was rather surprised, for he knew that Khadija had refused men of great importance. He liked Khadija, liked her very much, but marriage had not occurred to him. Now he gave his joyous consent. So on a fixed day he came with his uncles to Khadija's house. Her people were also present, and her uncle gave the bride away. Muhammad ﷺ paid her a dowry of 20 bakras, according to the custom of the Arabs.